The following program contains graphic calls to personal responsibility. If you are addicted to the system, Randall may not be right for you. Check with your local welfare office.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. And he knows where to find the best and worst jail food in America. Randall Terry.
That's all, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Looney Tunes. Yes, you've probably heard excerpts of President Obama's speech, but we're going to play more for you than the average guy. The basic theme is this. If jet owners won't pay their fair share, let's shoot their jets out of the air. Yeah, Obama surface-to-air missiles. Shoo, shoo. Get the wealthy, get them. They're the ones ruining this country. They're trying to bring hope and change on the back of old people. Oh, I feel better. Okay, today's program brought to you in part by the NFL negotiators. If President Obama and John Boehner can't get it together, it's time that they call in the big league negotiators. And by the great compromiser, Henry Clay. Yes, he helped start a civil war with compromise. I'll be right back after a quick word from my friend, Sir Reginald Bling, and we're gonna play some clips from President Obama. You're not gonna wanna miss it. Just turn the thing on, I got something to say. Barack Hussein Obama, Nancy Pelosi, John Boehner, Mitch McConnell, the farming guy, whatever he is, and Harry Reid, they are now meeting in secret negotiations to raise the debt ceiling. What is this, some kind of a dance move? Raise the debt ceiling? Homie, this is a runaway train. They are talking about enslaving you, your children, your grandchildren, heck, your great-grandchildren to their debt. All because they don't want to get rid of entitlements. What? You think we are entitled to be your slave labor force until the end of time? Folks, we are being railroaded. Wake up! Welcome back to the program, friend. You may or may not know this, but I'm the author of 6 published books with pretty near 400,000 books in print. I only tell you that, first of all, to impress you, but also I tell you so that you know that I love words. I'm a wordsmith. It's part of what I do. And before we analyze President Obama's speech, I want to tip my hat to his speechwriters. It was absolutely a genius speech. Now, please understand, the content was primarily from the Lake of Fire, but it was sold to us with such soothing words and such a balanced approach. I stole one of his words, his favorite words, balanced approach, from his speech. So let's dive into the speech. What we're going to see is President Obama, the parent, then President Obama, the child, then President Obama, the teenager, and then President Obama, dare I say it, the village idiot. So let's begin. Andrew, play clip 1.
This balanced approach asks everyone to give a little without requiring anyone to sacrifice too much. If you want a balanced approach to reducing the deficit. The first time a deal was passed, a predecessor of mine made the case for a balanced approach by saying this. But the new approach that Speaker Boehner unveiled today, it doesn't solve the problem. The only reason this balanced approach isn't on its way to becoming law right now is because a significant number of Republicans in Congress are insisting on a different approach. And keep in mind that under a balanced approach, the 98% of Americans who make under $250,000 would see no tax increases at all. None. What we're talking about under a balanced approach is asking Americans whose incomes have gone up the most over the last decade, millionaires and billionaires, to share in the sacrifice. I think that's a much better approach. Although serious deficit reduction would still require us to tackle the tough challenges of entitlement and tax reform.
All right, so I think we've got it. What we want is a balanced approach. Now, you have to understand, they've pulled that phrase, balanced approach. You don't use a phrase like that, which is so inane, mundane, a balanced approach. Oh, but it sounds so wise. You don't use a phrase like that unless you've polled it. And then once you've found out that it resonates with a certain part of the population, you use it over and over again. And so there's President Obama talking to all of us about the balanced approach. And who, may I ask, is a little unbalanced, a little unstable? What are the implications of someone who isn't quite all that balanced? They're lunatics. It's the Republicans. The parent Obama saying to all of us, I, your father, am balanced. And these renegades in the playground over there in the House of Representatives, they're unbalanced. Now, let's go to Obama, the child.
A cuts-only approach, an approach that doesn't ask the wealthiest Americans or biggest corporations to contribute anything at all. That's not right. It's not fair. Most Americans, regardless of political party, don't understand how we can ask a senior citizen to pay more for her Medicare before we ask a corporate jet owner or the oil companies to give up tax breaks that other companies don't get. That's not right. It's not fair. How can we ask a student to pay more for college before we ask hedge fund managers to stop paying taxes at a lower rate than their secretaries? How can we slash funding for education and clean energy before we ask people like me to give up tax breaks we don't need and didn't ask for? That's not right. It's not fair. We know what to expect 6 months from now. The House of Representatives will once again refuse to prevent default unless the rest of us accept their cuts-only approach. That's not right. It's not fair. And once again, the economy will be held captive unless they get their way. That's not right. It's not fair.
It's not right. It's not fair. You jet owners, you can't do this on the backs of the old people and the poor people. It's not right. We didn't ask for these tax breaks. I'm confused, President Obama. Are you our parent or are you the angry child? It's not right. It's not fair. Well, now we fast forward 10 years to the teenager. Let's look.
And I think these patriotic Americans are willing to pitch in. In fact, over the last few decades, they've pitched in every time we passed a bipartisan deal to reduce the deficit. It simply gives our country the ability to pay the bills that Congress has already racked up. Understand, raising the debt ceiling does not allow Congress to spend more money. Either way, I've told leaders of both parties that they must come up with a fair compromise in the next few days that can pass both houses of Congress. They're fed up with a town where compromise has become a dirty word. All they see is the same partisan three-ring circus here in Washington. But they didn't vote for a dysfunctional government. That's not right. It's not fair.
Now, that sounded to me like a teenager who was begging mom and dad, please give me one more chance with the credit card. I'll be good with it this time. I'll only go to Old Navy. I promise I won't go to that really nasty store that I went to. Those guys that focus on the family thinks are bad people. I'll only go to Old Navy and I'll only go to McDonald's with my friends. I will never go to Chili's again, Mom and Dad, please. Wait a minute. If you give Congress the money, they will spend it. Okay? Now, they might have obligated us to future debt, but you know what you can do? This is a crazy idea. Change course. Stop spending. It's really not that bizarre to say we are going to stop spending. Now, before I take my break, I want to talk to you about something. This was a genius speech regarding class warfare. Okay? Class warfare. How could we balance the budget, balance our spending on the backs of old people who are barely making it? How can we ask someone to pay less taxes who manages a hedge fund than their secretary? How are we going to keep giving all these breaks to the oil companies and to the owners of jets? Listen, I'm in favor, 100% favor of a fair tax, right? Everyone pays the same sales tax called the national sales tax. The government has no right to know how much you make. The government has no right to know how much anyone makes. Period. End of discussion. So if he really wanted to take a burden off the poor, he would simply get rid of the IRS, follow the fair tax plan with the prebate, with the money that comes every month to every American, and we would be done with this whole colossal insanity. And then when the rich people buy their $3 million jet or their $8 million jet, well, they pay a sales tax and it funds the federal government. And guess what? The wealthy at that point will pay a lot more taxes than that little old lady who's just worried about buying food. Do you understand? This is all Marxist. It's all class warfare. And by the way, one of the 10 demands of the Communist Manifesto was a heavily graduated income tax. In other words, if you're a poor person, you only pay this percentage of your income in taxes. But if you're really rich, you pay this percentage because you're rich and you should be willing to give your money to the poor. Because if you don't, you're not fair and it's just not right. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, I have to admit, I marveled at a lot of this speech until the line that we're going to play in the next segment. At that moment, well, our living room became almost a contact sport. It was certainly interactive. I didn't throw the chair at the television. My wife told me not to, but I was yelling at that TV. We'll play that clip when we come back from this break. I'll be right back.
Why is it that when you have been looking for something for hours, you find it in the last place you look? Could it be that it's because when you find it, you quit looking?
Moments with Moses. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You shall go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them.
Welcome back to the program, friend. Well, as I said early on in the show, I was really impressed by an awful lot of this speech. I didn't agree with almost any of the content, but as far as a speech goes, it worked. Evidently, the Capitol Hill switchboard was just about closed down, and the servers at Congress actually had a meltdown. They stopped working for a while because so many people were emailing. The one line that President Obama said that really and truly enraged me, and I don't know if you caught it, I don't know if you saw the speech. Well, let's just play it. Andrew, play the clip.
History is scattered with the stories of those who held fast to rigid ideologies and refused to listen to those who disagreed. But those are not the Americans we remember.
Oh, sorry, I was just clinging to my rigid ideology. Thank you, President Obama, for freeing me. I knew that was my problem. No, it wasn't my problem. Think about it. What is scattered with people who clung to a rigid ideology? Who are we talking about? Thomas Jefferson? He clung to a rigid ideology. Are we talking about George Washington? Are we talking about Patrick Henry? That's it. Patrick Henry, who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Patrick Henry, who with his hands held together in mock shackles said, "Is life so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God, I do not know what course others may take. But as for me, give me liberty or give me death." Now, see, in my book, that's a fairly intense clinging to a fairly rigid ideology. I'm just saying. And the crazy thing is that people like Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson, I mean, these are our American heroes, okay? Is President Obama talking perhaps about Martin Luther King? That's who he was talking about. Martin Luther King just clung a little too tightly to that rigid ideology that all men were equal and that they should be equal before the law and that Jim Crow laws should be broken, or abandoned rather, and the back of them should be broken. I think that Martin Luther King would have reached up and slapped Obama from the grave if he could have. That's how offensive what President Obama said. I ask you to tell me, who are your heroes that were the great compromisers? I mean, think of the American Revolutionary War. Who were the heroes? The ones that clung to their rigid ideology. I ask you to name me one reconciliationist or one loyalist from the American Revolution who sought compromise, and who was not willing to cling so tightly to their rigid ideology. Can you think of even one? Oh, wait, yes, I can. One comes to my mind. Benedict Arnold. Ha! The traitor. The betrayer of the cause. If you and I don't cling tightly to our rigid ideologies, like the laws of God and life and liberty under God, then we're all just going to be sheep led to the slaughter. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, a little bit of commentary about who exactly it is that would fall for that. I'll be right back.
I'll even donate my voice so that you don't cluck like a clucking, moronic, stupid peahead. I'll give you my backbone and my voice box if you just promise to use it.
It is a fine thing to be honest, but it is also very important to be right. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back to the program, friend. I want to play that 10-second clip again, and then just bare my heart to you for a minute, for your sake and mine. Andrew, play the clip.
History is scattered with the stories of those who held fast to rigid ideologies and refused to listen to those who disagreed. But those are not the Americans we remember.
All right. When you saw the speech, if you did in fact see it, did any alarm bells go off in your heart? Did any alarm bells go off in your head? I've been looking, watching, commentary, etc., and I haven't seen, I'm sure that they're out there, but I haven't seen anyone decrying that one segment. Now, some people say, well, it's because it's a throwaway line. I don't think so. I think it's because diversity training, tolerance training, training that we all have to get along, and so therefore we should compromise, even on issues that are central to us, life and death issues, liberty versus slavery issues. I think that most people have been so catechized or discipled or trained in the temples and in the schools of the proponents of slavery, of Marxism, of an anti-Judeo-Christian ethic, that it went right by them. And friend, hear me, that frightens me. In the last year, I have grown more fearful for the fate of this nation than I have ever been in my whole life. I am not someone given to fear, but I'm truly afraid now. And it's statements like this coming from arguably the most powerful political man in the Western Hemisphere or in the world. It's statements coming like that from him, and the lack of outcry from people who should know better, people who should know their history, people who should see what he's saying. He wants us to lay down our most sacred beliefs. He wants us to lay down our ideological weaponry, to not cling too tightly to the sword of truth. He wants us to lay it all down in surrender to the feet of his socialist, slave-driven agenda. The simple fact is that we are not a free people anymore. We're just not. We have some of the trappings of freedom. Thank God we still have a vote. But we're voting for more and more slavery. We're voting to steal our neighbor's goods. We're voting for the government to provide us a safety net from cradle to grave, which, though soft at the first touch, is lined with bitter steel. And we don't know enough to cry out in outrage and disgust when President Obama makes a statement like he did about scattered people who clung too tightly to their rigid ideology. If you were not alarmed, I ask you to please start to read some good books on freedom. Read Our Enemy, the State. That is a great book, very short, by Albert, I believe his last name was Nock. Read Our Enemy, the State. You can get it online. I don't sell it. It's inexpensive, and you'll want to read it. Or just read the Declaration of Independence again. There you go. Go online and read the Declaration of Independence, slowly and with feeling. And then ask yourselves, am I made of the fiber of Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry? Or am I made and woven from the cloth of President Obama? Don't worry, President Obama. I won't cling too tightly to my rigid ideology. I'll be right back with a quote from one of our founders. Oh, they clung tightly to that rigid ideology.
The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupted and become abominable in iniquities. There is none that doth good.
Noah Webster said, education is useless without the Bible. Think with me how educated President Obama is, but how foolish he has become. Why? Because he's turned his back on the Bible. Some of the most educated people in this country scoff at the sacred scriptures. And they prove Noah Webster's point, that their education was useless.